Thank you for listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. If you weren't able to catch that first segment, I talked about the running back situation, how the majority of running backs won't be franchise tagged by their current teams, and what that could mean for them, and just my thoughts on how the running backs are valued so far in the NFL and during this free agency. I now am able to move on to the next segment I wanted to bring up in this show. Some more league action going around in the NFL. I talked to you guys yesterday about the kickoff format potentially changing, and now the NFL is moving on to a different topic, or just piling on, I guess, to the kickoff format topic, and they want to bring up the drop hip tackles that have always played a role in the NFL, more so over the last few seasons. I believe it's become more of a national issue around the league, just because I think you're starting to see it a bit more with guys, bigger guys, being hurt, unfortunately, by these sort of tackles. It's basically, if you're unaware of what the drop hip tackle is when, if say you're on defense, you're running after a guy, and you're trying to bring them down, you wrap them up on their upper side or around their hips, and you basically just drop your feet and then just basically become dead weight hanging onto this offensive player. And because of that, you use your momentum to bring them down, and a lot of times these guys end up rolling over onto the offensive player's ankles, knees, and it really gets to some gruesome injuries, some bad injuries that we've seen, unfortunately, to some of the biggest players in the NFL. And obviously that's not good for the league if all these guys are getting hurt, specifically with the league trying to move towards or trending towards a more offensive-centered league, try to boost the numbers, get the offensive numbers more up there with the scoring and everything. If your top-end guys are getting hurt, a lot of the times it's not only bad, obviously, for the offense, but then I feel like it pushes the NFL to hindering the defense a bit more, and then it leads to a lot of confusion on the field, a lot of players being disgruntled, not agreeing with all the calls that are being made, and it just becomes more of an issue that I think now the NFL really wants to hone in on it and attack this problem, because the NFL Competition Committee is working on it, or is reportedly working on removing these tackles altogether, according to the NFL.com's Judy Batista. The reports also go along to say that, the committee is pretty much in the same sentiment, in the same place regarding the rule, that they feel that it is a dangerous play for NFL and for their stars, but currently at the moment they're looking for the right verbiage, the right sort of language to lay out there in the league's meetings in March to really set it as a point in the rule book, really, essentially, that this is what a drop hip tackle is, this is what you can't do, this is what the referees will be calling, all that sort of stuff. They're trying to get that all right, because if they do take this out of the NFL, it'll be the first time that they take out a sort of dangerous tackle since 2006, where they removed the horse collar tackle, and now that one's a lot more obvious to see if a guy has their hand in another player's shoulder pads and use that to bring it down. But it is a little trickier with the drop hip tackle, because a lot of these guys will obviously try and dive at someone's legs or someone's midsection to bring them down if they're a lot bigger than them. I think that's where the issue will kind of lead to in this next season if it is outlawed, because how do you tell the difference, honestly, between someone just diving at someone's legs just full on, or deciphering whether it's a hip drop tackle or not? You can't really review it too much, because even in a review in a slow motion, I find it really hard to decipher what is or what isn't a hip drop tackle. And that's what the competition committee is discussing right now, and it has been a more prominent issue over the last few years, like I mentioned. NFL executive Jeff Miller, who oversees player health and safety, said that this sort of tackle has been becoming more of an issue, and that he actually said that the chance of injury increases by 25 times the rate of a normal tackle does when players use this. And again, just touching on the subject of these players just doing anything that they can to tackle somebody else. It's something that players right now don't really think about. They don't, before they make a tackle or something like that, they don't think about, oh, is this going to be considered a drop hip tackle? Am I going to get flagged for this? They just go in really on instinct a lot of the times, just reacting to the play that they have to make and so on. That, you can't really play defense like that, thinking about, oh, am I going to get flagged for this? Am I hitting this guy too hard? Is this considered a drop hip tackle there, like I said? All that it's going to be really hard for the defenders, really most of all, to decipher whether this is going to be considered a drop hip tackle or not. There are going to be some hiccups along the road if this is banned from the NFL, but I mentioned before, you see a lot of these players getting injured. Like this past season alone, it was Geno Smith with his ankle, Tyreek Hill, and the most famous one that I remember was Mark Andrews, if you guys recall that game against the Bengals. They were down in the red zone, and they threw it short to Mark Andrews, and he is a pretty big guy for most guys to tackle, linebackers, anybody on defense, and Logan Wilson wrapped him up around the midsection and, dropped his weight and really hurt Mark Andrews on that play. He missed the majority of the season after that. He was able to be active in their game against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but, he was really never the same. He barely played in that game, and he missed a lot of time because of it, because of this sort of tackle. And now I think the league is at a point where they have to try and do something about it. Miller, the NFL executive, Jeff Miller, further stated in an interview that he had recently, he said, "To quantify it for you, we see an injury more or less every week in the regular season on the hip drop tackle." And he also brought this issue up in the league meetings in October. So this has sort of become an ongoing thing with the NFL and Jeff Miller and other executives that believe this has gone on far enough. I also saw a report that with the NFLPA, a lot of them are sharing the sort of frustrations that I am airing right now, just off the top of my head, with them saying, this is just going to further hinder the defense. This is going to make it a lot more difficult, I guess, for lack of a better terms, for any defender trying to make a tackle now, because now how are you supposed to bring down a guy? There's a specific way to tackle now, whereas these guys, I don't have to tell you guys, grew up, just get to the ball and tackle him and stop him. No one's thinking about how to do it. And more, I think the NFL is trying to outlaw these things to protect their stars, which I can agree with, but at the same time, it is a tricky sort of thing because, at what point has it gone too far where a tackle isn't just a tackle anymore? And I do agree that the drop hip tackle isn't a normal tackle, but I'm not out there playing every Sunday and thinking about a million other things as a defensive player before I start thinking about, oh, is this a drop hip tackle? Am I going to hurt this guy? It's going to be definitely a topic that goes on if it is passed, and it usually does lead to ankle injuries, like I said. And it is interesting when you're thinking of a quarterback or something like that, or running back, because already the quarterbacks, are mostly protected overall. You can't drop your weight on them. You can't hit them to the face. And now you can't drop hip tackle them, or what is considered to be a drop hip tackle. That's yet to be determined. It's like, at what point can't you not touch the quarterback at all? Just kind of just wrap them up and then that's it. I don't think it'll ever get to that. Hopefully not. But that's another thing that's just added on, really adding more pressure onto the defense because of these rules that they're implementing. And it is tough, really, right now. And the NFL competition committee is in a place where, there's some good members on that I think can voice some sort of reason towards the defense, because there's guys on there like Sean McDermott, Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay now. I think these guys have a good gauge on what the NFL should be, what kind of product that they want to put out there. And it just really comes down to this language, the sort of things they consider to be a drop hip tackle. And, if it does pass, I'm sure they're going to have a bunch of meetings and stuff like that to make sure everybody knows what this is. But it's really not going to stop any attempt, you could say, in games, because, like I mentioned, these players aren't really thinking about that in all the complexes of the game. And you're definitely still going to see it, obviously, whether it's flagged or not. I think it's just going to add a lot more controversy and a lot more things to talk about. If, a drop hip tackle is missed in a game, is that going to be able to be reviewed? If a flag is thrown or not? Like, imagine if Patrick Mahomes or, Joe Burrow gets sacked, it's a drop hip tackle, clearly on the review, but the flag isn't thrown, so it can't be reviewed. And then, where do you go from there? You lose your starting quarterback. You can't review the call or challenge it because no penalty flag was thrown. And then it just becomes this whole thing of diving deeper into the rules. Should every play be able to be reviewed, or what's the point of having this rule if these refs are going to miss it? There's going to be missed calls like that, but a lot of them are going to weigh more than others because it comes down to who's getting tackled, essentially. It's going to be made a bigger deal if these bigger stars are tackled and they might get hurt from it, compared to a third-string wide receiver or something like that who might not get the call, and they still might get injured, but the ref might not call it the same way that they do. All these little nuances that could come into effect are something that the committee has to definitely take into account. But at the same time, it's still in the early facets of trying to determine what is and what isn't a hip drop tackle. And to say it's going to be fully gone from the game, I think would be foolish. And with the NFL finally pointing a lot more light onto it, it'll be fascinating to see what comes of it, what other players think of it. It seems like an obvious choice right now, but if they pitch it to the rest of the NFL and these other teams, you could be surprised at how many would say that they don't want this rule included, that, it wouldn't benefit the players at all. It'll put too much pressure on the defense, and this rule might not get passed at all by all these teams. They need 24 out of the 32 teams to pass a rule change like this, and that's a lot of people that need to agree, a lot of high-end people that need to agree on a rule change before it's passed. And, a lot of players will voice their frustrations or their agreement with it if it does move on, but it's still in its early facets. I want to emphasize that. Nothing's being done about it. Nothing is being guaranteed that this is going to change. It's just been an idea that is becoming more popular, but, there's a lot of things that the NFL has to deal with, has to put into movement before anything is changed. And this is going to develop, gain more traction over the time of the offseason. And, it's going to be pretty cool to see if the NFL does move on for this. Like I mentioned, it'll be the most recent tackle that has been banned since the horse collar tackle. And I think that one was a lot more easier than the drop hip tackle. But we'll see where this ends up, Still early facets, but we're going to see where this ends up on that. That allows me to move on to my next segment, the Seahawks quarterback question. A lot of people aren't really talking about it. Who's going to be their quarterback? A lot of people think there's a pretty obvious answer, but the guy that runs the whole operation and who really decides who the quarterback is might think differently, or might not see it as easy as a choice as a lot of people do. That and more on the topic heading into the second half of the episode. Don't go away, because that topic's coming up, as well as the Giants and their own quarterback controversy surrounding the draft and what their future could look like if they were to make a move. So I'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more football talk and a lot more discussion to be had on this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.